A lovely letter arrived in the Clockspring 3D mailbox today, and it reads, Dear Sir, your car is illegally parked and will be impounded. It reads, Your prints and the presentation are always an eye candy. Can you please share your setup for photographing the prints? And that's what this video will be about. Now, it goes without saying that what I'm about to talk about all just centers around my particular taste in photography. So there are no wrong answers in photography, there are just stylistic choices. And these are mine. But hopefully you'll get some inspiration out of this and, work it into the way you want to do things. So, with that said, I'm going to break things down into 3 major considerations: background, lighting, and composition. Now, nowhere in there did we mention the camera, and that's because it really doesn't matter anymore. Your phone camera is equally as good in reasonable light conditions as anything else, and half the time that's what I use. Sometimes I'll use the camera that I'm filming on now, but the rest of the time I just use this. It's arguably more convenient and it's just as good. So unless there's some compelling reason to do otherwise, just use what you've got, because the camera won't make nearly as much difference as these other considerations will. Backgrounds. See, the way I see it, you've got 2 good choices for backgrounds. You can keep it relevant or you can keep it simple. And it's really easy to just make it simple. Now, you may notice that I have a very simple background here. And this is actually, trade secrets, that's photographic roll paper. So that is obscuring the fact that there's all this clutter behind me that would otherwise distract from what I'm trying to show. So this is Thunder Grey, by the way, it's my favorite shade. And the same goes for 3D printing photography or product photography or whatever. If you don't have a reason to do otherwise, keep it simple. So you'll see that a lot of the photos that I post of uploaded 3D printed designs use either a graduated grey or black or a stark white background, because they're really easy to manage. They really let you highlight the thing you're actually taking the photo of, and it's really easy to do. So it's easy to say use a simple background, but what does that actually mean in practice? Well, the easiest way that I can suggest to get a nice simple background that's easy to work with is go and find some coloured cardboard or card, heavy paper. Get black, get white, get whatever suits you. Now, personally, I have various colours and things here. What is that? That's like a slightly greeny grey. I have actual green. I have, there's a big sheet of red under here as well. And I even have some non-plain colours under here as well, somewhere. There we go. I've got some grid paper. So big sheets of gridded stuff that may or may not show up with various resolutions. Now, I practically never use these because I tend to stick to black, and you can guess what's coming, can't you? White! And I do that because working with different colours and different textures and ornamentation and so on takes thought and effort that isn't necessarily conducive to a quick photo shoot. So most of the time when I'm taking these sorts of photos, I'm trying to get it done in an expedient way. So I'm just trying to get a clean, convenient, appropriate, nice looking shot that captures what it is I'm trying to say about the object. And the black and white works really well for me for that. But again, stylistic choices, that's just kind of my thing as well. So I fully appreciate that that's just how I get the look that I want, but it may not be the look that you want. So, use whatever you want. But what I would suggest is that you be consistent. Consistency is really useful. If you do things in the same kind of way every time, you can build a workflow. You can build an approach to doing your photography that is quick, it's streamlined, you get to the results you want, you'll have your backgrounds worked out, you'll have your lighting that goes with your backgrounds, and you'll know how to position things to make use of them. And you'll know what camera settings to use and so on. So if you are consistent, then you get that over time for free. Now, consistency also means that, as you build the style, it becomes recognizable, which is great. So if you're consistent with your backgrounds, that's the most obvious way to build a recognizable style. So that's backgrounds. So basically what I'm saying is, if you want an easy way to take photos cleanly, just go get some paper. If there's one thing that is absolutely critical though, it's lighting. And if you only get one thing right, make it your lighting. Backgrounds kind of matter, composition kind of matters, but lighting is, you've got to get that right, or you've got to have it at least good enough. So fortunately, there's some really easy ways of doing it. And one of them requires very little equipment whatsoever and no cost. And in fact, let's start with that one. Now, my absolute favorite approach to lighting is to just find a window. Ideally a window with curtains or mesh blinds or something like that will diffuse the light. If it's a cloudy day, that also works. Clouds are nature's diffuser, and you'll get this beautiful soft light. And the beautiful thing about that is that you get this amazing soft fill light for free, for nothing. So just set up your background in front of a window like that, and just have a look at the curve on the back of that backdrop paper though. You'll notice that I've kind of curved it away from the light so that I get a darker background there. That again is a stylistic choice, but it's one that can be really useful. So if you want to just get more of a contrast there between the object that's lit up and the background, especially if you're using a black backdrop, not so relevant on the white one, then blocking some of the light can be useful as well. But by far and away, my favorite approach to lighting these shots is just find a window and do that during the day. Now, nighttime is a different matter, and we can't rely on the sun then, obviously. So what I'll generally do is I'll use some actual camera equipment, like a flash. And I will take my camera. This is an antique camera that I had sitting in a bag. I don't know how many years it's been since this came out, but the one I would normally use is sitting right there. So what I'll generally do is set up something like this. So that's our backdrop. We can use my phone to hold that down. So that's our backdrop. I'll try not to crease that too much. Don't crease your backdrop paper. Put our subject there, and what I'll do is I'll just bounce the light off the ceiling so that I get soft illumination. So we're using the ceiling as a big diffuser. I mean, it's a really common technique, and you'll want to play with the angle of your flash depending on how far away you are. So it's a really simple approach to flash photos indoors in general, but it works well for this, but not as well as the window. If you've got a window and the sun, then that's really hard to beat, but this works well. Now, beyond that, there's all sorts of complicated lighting setups you could do, but between this and the window, I don't need anything else, honestly. And that brings us to composition. And composition is the hardest one to have hard and fast rules for, because it all really just comes down to, what are you trying to show? So what are you trying to communicate about the thing that you're taking a photo of? Because it's never just, I want to show that it's a thing. There's always some aspect of it that has led you to design the thing or print it or create it or whatever. There's a reason why you liked it, and that should come through in the photography. So personally, it'll depend on the type of object that we're talking about. So for a sculptural thing like this, there'll be particular shapes. So for this one, this profile here, that's what it's all about for this one. I mean, it's that saw blade thing that gave this object its title. But this swirl on the side was also another thing that really worked for me. So the photography of this, and this tends to be the case with the geometric stuff that I do, I tend to go for those classic angles, those orthographic projections, the side view, the top view, and so on, and maybe a 3/4 view. But I tend to keep it very aligned and clean and clinical. But something like this is a different matter entirely. I mean, with this, it's a figure that has character, and I'm trying to communicate some kind of emotion when I'm taking photos of this. Am I trying to make this look like a spooky spider? Am I trying to make it look cute? And those sorts of questions will drive how the composition works. Now, with googly eyes, you're not really going to do anything other than try to make it look cute. But what that comes down to in reality is just trying different angles until you can look at the shot and say, okay, that's what I was after. That's the emotion I was after. Not necessarily, that's the composition I was after, but that achieves what I wanted in terms of the overall sentiment of the picture. And that can be hard to gauge, obviously, but making sure you step back and just have in mind some kind of goal with what it is you're trying to feel when you look at the photo will really help drive those things. And then we get something like this, and I mean, am I trying to show this as a functional object? Is it a sculptural object? And that really comes down to, why did I make this thing? Why am I posting this thing on the internet? Is it because it's got a screw lid? Is it because it's got this texture? What are the aspects of this that I like personally? And personally, it is that texture. So that's what I'll highlight. I'll position it so that the lighting will work with the textures and bring those out. And that's another really good point. You can use the lighting to really drive composition as well, because different compositions will use the lighting in different ways. You can reduce shadows, or you can accentuate shadows. You can highlight features and you can conceal them. And those can be really important in, again, getting that ultimate kind of sentiment you want. Are we going for clean and clinical, or are we going for organic and friendly, or textural? What is it that we want to be able to look at and say, yes, that's communicated that effectively. Now, the thing with functional designs is that it can be really useful to show them in action. So that comes back to the backgrounds as well. If there's something that actually has practical use, showing it in place, in use, can really engage with somebody who's looking at this stuff. And you should take advantage of that. So those are the things that are important to me, those three elements, when I'm doing my photography of 3D printed items. But there's one other really important aspect to consider, and that is practice. Now, every time we print something, it's an opportunity to photograph it. So I try to make it a rigorous part of my workflow that when I print something new, I take photos. And that lets me refine my workflow, which makes it simpler every time, which makes it easier, more straightforward. So I don't really have to think about it anymore. And that's a really useful thing, because that way I always make sure I have the photos and I don't have to go back and find things that I've printed, if I even still have them, just because I've decided I want to post a design online. But even if you're not posting things online, it's really useful to be able to take those photos, and the more you do it, the better you'll be and the easier it will be as well. So on that note, you can find me on Twitter at Clockspring3D, as kind writer Inera did. You'll find me on My Mini Factory as well. You can just search for Clockspring and you'll find me on there. And I'm probably on other places as well that I don't remember right now. But on that note, enjoy your photography and have fun!